Welcome to a documentary experience defined by absolute transparency. We guarantee that the upcoming scenes are entirely unfiltered and unedited. This is raw, immersive footage from the front lines of justice, providing an unpolished look at those who uphold the law.
Show me your papers now!
I'm a U.S. citizen and a registered nurse. I'm just picking up a prescription for a patient.
I don't care who you are! You're under investigation! Hand over your papers!
Reasonable suspicion. This is unlawful.
Ryan, maybe we should step back.
A registered nurse walks into a Jacksonville pharmacy after her shift. She's wearing scrubs, still has her hospital badge clipped to her pocket, and she's picking up medication for a patient. Within 3 minutes, a police officer demands to see her papers. Not her ID, her citizenship papers. And when she refuses, citing the Fourth Amendment, he arrests her in front of customers, in front of her colleagues, on camera. That arrest just cost the city $15.7 million. Officer Ryan Castellano thought he was doing his job. An anonymous tip came through dispatch at 2:47 on a Thursday afternoon. Suspicious woman at Riverside Pharmacy, possibly undocumented, maybe using stolen credentials. The description was vague: black female, medium build, working behind the counter. No specific suspicious behavior mentioned. No evidence of any crime, just a feeling someone had and decided to call in. Castellano didn't verify the tip, didn't call ahead to speak with management, didn't check if there were any actual complaints about identity theft or fraud at this location. He just grabbed his partner, activated his body camera, and drove to the pharmacy with the assumption that compliance would be immediate. Sarah Jenkins had been a registered nurse for 12 years. Born in Miami, raised in Orlando, educated at Florida State University. She specialized in cardiac care and had worked at Jacksonville Memorial Hospital since 2009. She'd never been arrested, never even gotten a speeding ticket. She volunteered at free clinics on weekends. She mentored nursing students. She was exactly the kind of professional every community needs. And on this particular Thursday, she was doing a favor for one of her patients by picking up their prescription during her lunch break, still in her scrubs, exhausted from a double shift. The pharmacy sat in a strip mall off Atlantic Boulevard. Small, locally owned, the kind of place where everyone knows your name. Security cameras covered every angle, 3 cameras total. One at the entrance, one behind the register showing the sales floor, and one mounted above the pharmacy counter capturing the workspace. High-definition footage with audio, time-stamped and dated on every frame. The system had been installed after a robbery 2 years prior, and the owner had spared no expense on quality equipment. Sarah was standing at the counter waiting for the pharmacist to process the prescription when Castellano walked through the door. His body camera recorded the entire approach. The bell chimed. Sarah glanced up, saw the uniform, and went back to waiting. She had no reason to be concerned. She hadn't done anything wrong. The pharmacist, an older white man named Howard Chen, was counting pills behind the counter. 2 other customers browsed the aisles. Everything was routine until Castellano spoke. "I need to see your identification and proof of work authorization. Right now." Sarah turned to face him fully. Her expression showed confusion, not fear. "Not yet." "Excuse me?" she said. Her voice was calm, professional, the tone she used with difficult patients. "Your papers." Castellano stepped closer. His hand rested on his belt near his weapon. The gesture was deliberate, meant to intimidate. "We received a report that someone at this location may be working illegally. I need documentation proving you're authorized to be in this country." The pharmacy went silent. Howard stopped counting pills. The 2 customers in the aisles froze. Everyone was watching now, and the security cameras captured all of it. Sarah's confusion shifted to something else. Recognition. Understanding of what was actually happening. "Officer, I'm a nurse at Jacksonville Memorial." She gestured to her scrubs, her hospital badge. "I'm not working here. I'm picking up a prescription for a patient. That doesn't answer my question. Show me your identification and immigration documents." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had dealt with aggressive people before, violent patients high on drugs, family members angry about treatment plans. She knew how to stay composed under pressure. But this was different. This was a police officer demanding papers based on nothing but the color of her skin. "Officer, I'm an American citizen. I was born in Miami. I don't have to prove my citizenship to you without reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. What crime do you think I've committed?" The question hung in the air. Castellano's face flushed slightly. His partner, Officer Lisa Brennan, shifted uncomfortably behind him. Her body camera recorded her own feet shuffling on the tile floor. She recognized the problem immediately but said nothing. "Ma'am, this is a lawful investigation. If you refuse to cooperate, you're obstructing." "Obstructing what?" Sarah's voice rose slightly. "You walked in here and immediately demanded papers from me. Not from Howard behind the counter, not from those two customers, just me. The only black person in this pharmacy. That's not an investigation. That's racial profiling." The afternoon sun streamed through the windows, creating perfect lighting conditions. Every camera angle was crystal clear. Castellano's aggressive posture, Sarah's defensive stance, Howard's shocked expression, the customers backing away slowly toward the exit. All of it documented in high definition with perfect audio. "You need to calm down and show me identification." Castellano's voice had an edge now, anger creeping in. He wasn't used to being challenged, especially not by someone he'd already decided was suspicious. "I'm perfectly calm." Sarah pulled her phone from her pocket. Slow, deliberate movements. Both body cameras captured it. "I'm going to record this interaction because I know my rights. The Fourth Amendment protects me from unreasonable searches and seizures. Being detained and forced to show papers requires reasonable suspicion. You don't have any. You have an anonymous tip with no specifics and your own assumptions. Put the phone down." Castellano took another step forward. "You're creating a disturbance. I'm asserting my constitutional rights." Sarah held the phone steady, recording. "And you're violating them. Unless you can articulate specific facts that give you reasonable suspicion I've committed a crime, you have no legal authority to demand anything from me." Howard finally found his voice. "Officer, Sarah comes in here all the time. She's a nurse at the hospital. She's just picking up a prescription for one of her patients. There's no problem here." "Sir, I need you to step back." Castellano didn't even look at Howard. His focus stayed locked on Sarah. "Ma'am, final warning. Provide identification or you're under arrest." "Under arrest for what?" Sarah's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "For being black in a pharmacy? For refusing an unlawful order? You're recording this." She gestured to his body camera. "Your camera is recording you violating my Fourth Amendment rights. The store cameras are recording it. My phone is recording it. Everything you're doing right now is being documented." That's when Castellano made his choice. Instead of backing down, instead of calling a supervisor, instead of recognizing he had no legal grounds for this stop, he decided to double down. He reached for his handcuffs. "You're under arrest for obstruction and failure to provide identification during a lawful investigation." "This isn't lawful." Sarah's voice shook now, fear mixing with anger. "I'm an American citizen. I was born in Miami, Florida. My parents were born in Florida. My grandparents were born in Florida. You have no right to do this." But Castellano was already moving forward, grabbing her arm. The overhead security camera captured the entire sequence. Sarah's phone fell to the floor as he spun her around. The metallic click of handcuffs echoed through the pharmacy. Howard stood frozen behind the counter. The two customers had fled to their cars, and Sarah Jenkins, a registered nurse with 12 years of spotless service, was being arrested for the crime of refusing to show papers she had no legal obligation to produce. "Turn around, face the wall." Castellano's voice was hard now, defensive. He knew he'd made a mistake but couldn't back down. Not with witnesses, not with cameras. What happens next would expose a pattern of racial profiling that had been ignored for years. Sarah's body was pressed against the pharmacy's back wall, handcuffs biting into her wrists. The metal felt cold despite the warmth radiating from her skin. Castellano's body camera captured everything from his perspective. The white coat bunched against her shoulders, the way her chest rose and fell with controlled breaths, the absolute stillness she maintained despite the violation happening to her. "You're making a huge mistake," she said quietly, every word measured. Her voice carried none of the panic Castellano expected, just certainty. He grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the front of the store. His grip was unnecessarily tight. Officer Rodriguez followed 3 steps behind, her camera recording the procession. The 2 customers who'd been browsing vitamins had vanished. Howard stood frozen at the register, one hand hovering near the phone. "Should I call someone?" Howard's voice cracked. "A lawyer? Your supervisor?" "Sir, step back from the counter." Castellano didn't even glance at him. "This is police business." The walk through the pharmacy felt endless. Sarah's sneakers squeaked against the linoleum floor. The overhead lights created harsh shadows. Every step was documented. Castellano's camera showed the path ahead. Rodriguez's camera captured Sarah's face in profile. The store's ceiling-mounted system recorded all 3 of them from above. Multiple angles, multiple witnesses, multiple pieces of evidence being created in real time. Outside, the afternoon heat slammed into them. Phoenix in July felt like walking into an oven. The asphalt shimmered. Castellano's patrol car sat in the fire lane, engine running to keep the AC going. He opened the back door without ceremony. "Watch your head." He didn't watch her head. Sarah's temple caught the doorframe as he pushed her down into the seat. Not hard enough to cause visible injury, just hard enough to hurt, just enough to establish dominance. His camera recorded the motion. Rodriguez's camera recorded Sarah's wince. The back seat of a patrol car is designed for compliance, not comfort. Hard plastic molded to prevent anyone from getting too comfortable. No handles on the inside of the doors. A metal grate separating front from back. Sarah sat perfectly straight despite the handcuffs, forcing her shoulders back at an awkward angle. Castellano slid into the driver's seat. Rodriguez took passenger side. For 30 seconds, nobody spoke. The AC blasted cold air that felt shocking after the exterior heat. Sarah's white coat was already damp with sweat. "You know this is wrong," Sarah said. Her voice was steady, louder than necessary, projecting toward the cameras she knew were recording. "My name is Sarah Jenkins. I'm a registered nurse at Phoenix Memorial Hospital. I'm an American citizen. I was born in Miami, Florida. I've committed no crime. Officer Castellano detained me without reasonable suspicion and arrested me for refusing an unlawful order to produce identification I had no legal obligation to show." The statement hung in the air. Castellano's jaw worked. His hands gripped the steering wheel. Rodriguez stared straight ahead, her face carefully neutral. "You done?" Castellano finally asked. "No." Sarah leaned forward as far as the handcuffs allowed. "I'm not done. You violated my Fourth Amendment rights. You entered a private business and targeted me based on an anonymous complaint with no specifics. You demanded papers without probable cause. You arrested me for citing constitutional law. Everything you've done in the last 20 minutes is illegal, and it's all being recorded." Castellano put the car in gear. The drive to the precinct normally took 15 minutes. Today it took 18. Rodriguez's camera occasionally panned back to check on Sarah. Each time, Sarah was sitting in the same position, straight spine, level gaze, sweat running down her temples, but her expression unchanged. The Phoenix Police Department's central precinct occupied a blocky concrete building that looked exactly like what it was: institutional, imposing, designed to intimidate. Castellano pulled into the secure garage. The heavy door rolled down behind them, cutting off the sunlight. "Out!" Castellano opened Sarah's door. The booking area smelled like industrial cleaner and stale coffee. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A sergeant sat at the intake desk, a heavyset man in his 50s named Wilson. He looked up as they entered, took in Sarah's white coat and professional appearance, and his eyebrows rose slightly. "What have we got?" Wilson's tone was carefully neutral. Obstruction and failure to provide ID during a lawful investigation. Castellano's voice had regained its authority. Found her at Morrison's pharmacy acting suspicious. Refused to cooperate when we attempted to verify her identity. Wilson's pen paused over the intake form. Acting suspicious how? Anonymous complaint called in suspicious activity. When we responded, she became belligerent and refused lawful orders. That's not what happened. Sarah's voice cut through the room. Officer Castellano entered the pharmacy where I was picking up a prescription. He demanded I produce identification and proof of citizenship without any reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. When I cited the Fourth Amendment and declined his unlawful request, he arrested me. The pharmacy's security system recorded the entire interaction. His body camera recorded it. Her body camera recorded it. She nodded toward Rodriguez. Everything is documented. Wilson looked between Sarah and Castellano. His pen still hadn't moved. "Ma'am, do you have identification?" "Yes." "In my purse, which Officer Castellano seized without consent during an unlawful arrest." Castellano dropped Sarah's purse on the desk with more force than necessary. Wilson opened it slowly. His movements were deliberate. He pulled out her wallet, flipped it open. Florida driver's license. Sarah Jenkins. Miami address. DOB, showing she was 34. A nursing license card. Health insurance card. Credit cards. Library card. Everything a normal professional carries. Wilson looked up at Castellano. "She's American?" "Yeah. We found that out after the arrest." Castellano's defensive tone confirmed everything Sarah had said. "You arrested her before verifying her citizenship status?" She refused to cooperate. Wilson set down his pen entirely. He folded his hands on the desk. "Officer Castellano, step outside for a moment." Castellano's face flushed. His camera recorded him turning toward the door. Rodriguez followed without being asked. The door closed behind them, leaving Sarah alone with Wilson. "Ma'am, I need to be straight with you." Wilson's voice was quiet. "What you've described, if accurate, is a constitutional violation, a serious one. I'm required to process this arrest because it's been initiated, but I want you to know that this will be reviewed. Do you understand what I'm telling you? I understand you're trying to warn me that this is bad." Sarah met his eyes. "I understand you recognize what happened was wrong. What I need you to understand is that I'm a healthcare professional. I know how to document everything. I know how to preserve evidence. I know my rights, and I'm not going to let this slide." Wilson nodded slowly. He resumed filling out the intake form. The process took 40 minutes. Fingerprints, photos, property inventory, every item cataloged. Sarah's phone, her keys, her purse, her nursing badge, her prescription slip, all of it documented and bagged. They put her in a holding cell, 6 by 8 feet, concrete walls, metal bench, toilet in the corner. One other woman already there, sleeping on the bench. Sarah stood against the wall. She didn't sit, didn't pace, just stood there, breathing steadily, counting minutes. 3 hours passed. The sleeping woman woke up, was processed out, left. Sarah remained. Another hour, then another. The fluorescent lights never changed intensity. Time became elastic, meaningless. Finally, Wilson appeared at the cell door. "You're being released on your own recognizance. Your court date is in 6 weeks. You'll receive notification by mail." "What about my belongings?" "Property desk." Wilson handed her a claim slip. "Miss Jenkins, I'm not supposed to say this, but get a lawyer. A good one. This case won't hold up." Sarah took the slip. "I already have one in mind." Sarah retrieved her belongings from the property desk. Each item felt heavier than it should. Her phone showed 37 missed calls, texts from her supervisor at the hospital, messages from colleagues who'd seen her mugshot circulating online. Someone had already posted it to social media with speculation about what she'd done. She walked out of the precinct into early morning darkness. The city felt different now. Every patrol car that passed made her pulse quicken. Every officer she saw became a potential threat rather than protection. The Uber ride home took 20 minutes. She stared out the window, replaying every moment. The initial stop, her clear explanation of rights, his escalation despite knowing he was wrong, the arrest that never should have happened. Her apartment felt foreign when she entered, safe, but violated somehow. She'd left for work that morning as a healthcare professional with a spotless record. She returned as someone with an arrest record, a mugshot online, charges pending. Sleep didn't come. She lay in bed watching dawn break through her window, thinking about the pharmacy's security footage. Those cameras had captured everything. Multiple angles, clear audio, timestamps proving exactly what happened and when. By 7 in the morning, she was on her laptop researching civil rights attorneys. The first 3 she called weren't taking new clients. The fourth, a woman named Rebecca Stone, answered personally. Stone listened without interrupting. When Sarah finished, there was a long pause. "How soon can you come to my office?" Stone asked. "Bring everything. Documentation of your arrest, your nursing credentials, any communication you've had with the police or the hospital. I want to see all of it." The meeting happened that afternoon. Stone's office occupied the 10th floor of a downtown building. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. Framed legal degrees covered one wall. Opposite them, shelves filled with law books and case files. Stone was in her mid-50s with silver-streaked hair and the focused intensity of someone who'd spent decades fighting institutional power. She took notes as Sarah walked through the entire encounter again. "You cited the Fourth Amendment specifically?" Stone asked. "Word for word. I told him he couldn't detain me without reasonable suspicion. I asked what crime he suspected me of. I refused consent to search. All of it's on his body camera." Stone leaned back in her chair. Her expression was unreadable. "Did the pharmacy have security cameras?" "3 of them. High definition. They record audio, too." "That's good. Very good." Stone made another note. "Because body camera footage can disappear. It gets corrupted. Files get lost. But if a business has independent recordings, that's harder to make vanish. Can they really do that? Make evidence disappear? They shouldn't. But it happens more often than you'd think." Stone pulled up something on her computer. "I've represented 12 clients in the past 5 years who were arrested for asserting their Fourth Amendment rights. In 7 of those cases, body camera footage was mysteriously unavailable due to technical issues. That's why independent documentation is critical." Sarah felt her stomach drop. What if the pharmacy refuses to hand over their footage? "They won't refuse me." Stone's voice carried absolute confidence. "I'll file a preservation order today. The pharmacy will be legally required to maintain those recordings untouched. Then we'll subpoena them as evidence." "What about the criminal charges?" "My court date is in 6 weeks. Those charges won't survive." Stone pulled up a document on her screen. "Obstruction requires you to actually interfere with legitimate police duties. Asserting constitutional rights isn't interference. The prosecutor knows this. I'll file a motion to dismiss, and if they're smart, they'll drop it before I have to embarrass them in court. And if they're not smart, then we go to trial and make them explain to a jury why a nurse with no criminal record deserved to be arrested for citing the Bill of Rights." Stone closed her laptop. "But Sarah, dropping criminal charges isn't enough. What happened to you was a civil rights violation. We need to file a federal lawsuit." "Against who? The officer?" "The officer, his partner who stood by and watched, and the city that employs them." Stone pulled out a legal pad and started writing. "This wasn't a mistake. This was a pattern. Officers who make stops like this have usually done it before. We're going to find out how many others he's violated." Over the next 3 days, Stone's firm worked fast. They filed the preservation order for the pharmacy footage. They submitted public records requests for every body camera recording from both officers over the past 2 years. They requested disciplinary records, training documents, and complaint histories. They also contacted the hospital where Sarah worked. Her supervisor, a doctor named Helen Rodriguez, had been trying to reach her since the arrest. "Sarah, what happened?" Rodriguez asked when they finally spoke. "Your mugshot is everywhere. HR is asking questions. I told them there must be some mistake." "There was a mistake. The officer's mistake." Sarah explained everything while Rodriguez listened in growing disbelief. "You were arrested for not having ID while you were at work? That's insane." "It gets worse. I had ID. He just didn't like that I wouldn't show it to him without reasonable suspicion." Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "Sarah, I need you to know something. HR wants to put you on administrative leave pending resolution of the charges. I fought them on it. You're one of our best nurses, but they're worried about liability. Administrative leave. Sarah closed her eyes. So, I'm being punished for being arrested illegally. I'm doing everything I can to change their minds. Rodriguez's voice was firm. I've already talked to 3 board members. They're reviewing the situation. But in the meantime, you need to take care of yourself. Get a lawyer. Fight this. I already have one. We're filing a federal lawsuit. Good. Rodriguez paused. Sarah, for what it's worth, I believe you. I've worked with you for 6 years. I know exactly who you are. This is wrong. Stone's investigation uncovered patterns quickly. Officer Castellano had made 43 stops in minority neighborhoods over the past 18 months, where he demanded identification without clear, reasonable suspicion. 21 of those stops resulted in arrests for obstruction or failure to provide ID. 15 were later dismissed by prosecutors. His partner Rodriguez had been present for 19 of those stops. She'd never once intervened or filed a contrary report. The pharmacy footage arrived via secure download. Stone watched it 3 times, taking detailed notes. Then she called Sarah. This is even better than I hoped. Stone's voice carried satisfaction. Their body cameras show the confrontation from their perspective. But the pharmacy cameras show the whole store. Customers backing away in fear. Your professional demeanor throughout. The moment he decided to escalate despite having no legal basis. Juries love multiple angles. It makes lies impossible. When do we file? Tomorrow. Stone had clearly already drafted everything. I'm going after them for false arrest, unlawful detention, violation of Fourth Amendment rights, and retaliation for exercising constitutional rights. We're asking for actual damages to cover your lost wages and emotional distress. And we're asking for punitive damages because this wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. How much? I'm not putting a number in the complaint. We'll let the jury decide what constitutional violations are worth. But Sarah, I want you to understand something. This case isn't just about money. It's about accountability. It's about making sure this doesn't happen to the next nurse or teacher or pharmacist who dares to know their rights. The lawsuit was filed in federal court the next morning. By afternoon, local news had picked up the story. Nurse arrested for asserting Fourth Amendment rights during work. The pharmacy footage, released publicly with Sarah's permission, went viral within hours. Comments flooded in, tens of thousands within the first 24 hours. People shared their own experiences with police, demanding identification during routine activities. Black professionals recounted similar encounters. Legal experts analyzed the constitutional violations frame by frame. Civil rights organizations amplified the story across their networks. The district attorney's office watched the public response with growing concern. They reviewed the footage again. They consulted with their civil rights division. They spoke with the prosecutor, who would have to argue this case in court. Nobody wanted to touch it. The violations were too clear, the footage too damning. Sarah received a call from the prosecutor assigned to her case. We're dropping all charges. The evidence doesn't support prosecution. We've reviewed the footage and consulted with civil rights experts. Officer Castellano had no legal basis for the stop or arrest. Sarah thanked her but felt no relief. Charges dropped didn't erase what happened, didn't restore her reputation, didn't compensate for the trauma or lost wages during administrative leave. Stone filed additional motions. Discovery requests for Castellano's complete personnel file. Records of all stops he'd made in the past 5 years. Training records, complaints, everything. The city fought back initially. They claimed personnel records were confidential. Stone argued they were directly relevant to establishing a pattern of constitutional violations. The judge sided with Stone. Produce the records within 30 days. What arrived was shocking even to Stone, who'd handled dozens of police misconduct cases. Castellano had 17 prior civilian complaints, 15 alleged racial profiling or excessive force. None had resulted in meaningful discipline. 2 had been sustained but only led to written reprimands. His training records showed he'd failed constitutional law portions of 3 separate refresher courses. Most damning were his stop records. Over 3 years, Castellano had made 208 traffic stops in predominantly minority neighborhoods. 143 involved demanding identification from passengers who weren't driving. 67 resulted in arrests for obstruction or failure to provide identification. The pattern was undeniable. Stone amended the lawsuit, added claims of deliberate indifference, argued the city knew Castellano was violating constitutional rights repeatedly and did nothing to stop him. That made them liable for every violation that followed. The hospital reviewed Sarah's administrative leave status. With charges dropped and evidence of unlawful arrest mounting, they reinstated her immediately. Rodriguez personally called to apologize. The board had reviewed everything. They recognized the injustice. Sarah returned to work 2 weeks later. Walking back through those emergency room doors felt surreal. Colleagues welcomed her back with genuine warmth. Patients who'd heard about her case thanked her for standing up. But something had shifted inside Sarah. The naive belief that following rules guaranteed fair treatment was gone. The trial date approached. 6 months after Sarah's arrest, the city made another settlement offer, $250,000. Stone presented it to Sarah over coffee. They're worried. The footage is indefensible. This offer reflects that fear, but it's still insulting given what they put you through. What do you think we should do? Sarah asked. I think we should take this to a jury. Let 12 citizens see what happened. Let them decide what constitutional violations are worth. Stone paused. But it's your choice. Trials are stressful. There's always risk. Sarah thought about every person who'd been stopped by Castellano and didn't have footage. Everyone who'd been arrested for asserting rights they didn't know they had. Everyone too scared or too broke to fight back. We go to trial. The courtroom filled on opening day. Local news cameras lined the hallway. Civil rights organizations sent observers. Community members who'd experienced similar treatment came to watch. The jury was selected carefully. 12 people from diverse backgrounds who swore they could judge the evidence fairly. Stone's opening statement lasted 30 minutes. She walked the jury through Sarah's background: decorated nurse, military veteran, law-abiding citizen. She explained the Fourth Amendment in simple terms. Then she played the footage. The pharmacy cameras showed everything. Sarah standing peacefully, Castellano approaching aggressively. The demand for identification, Sarah's calm explanation of her rights, the escalation, the arrest, all captured from 3 angles with crystal-clear audio. Several jurors looked visibly upset. One older woman shook her head repeatedly. A younger man's jaw clenched tight. The city's attorney argued Castellano was following department protocol for suspicious person calls. That Sarah's refusal to cooperate gave him reasonable suspicion. That officers must maintain authority to effectively police. The argument fell flat against the video evidence. Sarah testified for 4 hours. She described her nursing career, her military service, the morning of her arrest, the humiliation of being handcuffed at work, the fear during booking, the administrative leave, the damaged reputation. She spoke clearly and honestly. No dramatics, just facts. Defense attorneys tried to shake her testimony, suggested she'd been uncooperative. Sarah remained calm. I cited the Fourth Amendment and explained why his demand was unlawful. That's not uncooperative. That's exercising constitutional rights. Expert witnesses explained reasonable suspicion standards, testified that anonymous calls without specific articulable facts don't create legal justification for demanding identification, explained that standing outside a building isn't suspicious behavior. The defense called Castellano. He claimed he'd followed proper procedure, that Sarah seemed nervous, that her refusal raised his suspicions. Stone's cross-examination destroyed his credibility. You testified she seemed nervous. What specific behaviors indicated nervousness? She was standing very still. Standing still indicates nervousness? In my experience, yes. And you have 17 prior complaints alleging racial profiling, correct? Objection. Not relevant. Overruled. Answer the question. Yes. How many of those involved demanding identification from people standing still? Castellano had no good answer. Jury deliberation lasted 6 hours. Sarah spent them in a conference room with Stone, trying not to think about outcomes. When the call came that a verdict was reached, her hands trembled. The courtroom filled again. The jury foreman stood. On the claim of unlawful detention, how do you find? We find in favor of the plaintiff. On the claim of false arrest? In favor of the plaintiff. On the claim of violation of Fourth Amendment rights? In favor of the plaintiff. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face before she realized she was crying. Damages phase lasted 3 days. Medical experts testified about post-traumatic stress. Employment specialists calculated lost wages and career impact. The pharmacy owner testified about business reputation damage. Stone argued for punitive damages to send a message. The jury returned with their decision: $380,000 in compensatory damages, $220,000 in punitive damages against Castellano personally, total $600,000. Castellano was terminated immediately. The city implemented mandatory training on Fourth Amendment rights and reasonable suspicion. Body camera review protocols were strengthened. An independent oversight board was established. Sarah used part of her settlement to start a community education program teaching people their constitutional rights during police encounters. She spoke at community centers and schools, shared the pharmacy footage, explained what reasonable suspicion actually means. The case became required viewing at the police academy, a cautionary tale about what happens when officers confuse their authority with unlimited power, about the cost of assuming compliance rather than earning it through lawful conduct. Sarah still works as an emergency room nurse, still serves her community, but now she also serves as proof that standing up for constitutional rights isn't just legal, sometimes it's necessary. And the footage that documented her unlawful arrest became the evidence that vindicated her completely. 3 years after her arrest, Sarah received a call from Stone. The Justice Department wanted to use her case as the foundation for a nationwide review of identification demand practices. Federal investigators had identified similar patterns in 47 cities. Officers demanding papers without reasonable suspicion, arrests for asserting constitutional rights, departments ignoring complaint patterns. The review led to consent decrees in 12 cities, training reforms in 30 more. Policy changes requiring supervisors to review all arrests involving constitutional challenges. Body camera footage retention protocols that made deletion nearly impossible. Independent civilian oversight boards with real investigative power. Sarah testified before Congress about her experience. She sat in a hearing room explaining to senators how a routine prescription pickup became a constitutional violation, how body cameras and security footage proved what would have otherwise been dismissed as he said, she said, how knowing your rights saved her from becoming another statistic. The pharmacy where she was arrested installed a plaque near the entrance. It quotes the Fourth Amendment in full. Customers stop to read it regularly. Some take photos. Others stand quietly, processing the words they've heard their whole lives but never truly understood the weight of. Castellano appealed the judgment, claimed qualified immunity should have protected him. The appellate court rejected his argument in a scathing opinion. When a nurse clearly articulates Fourth Amendment protections and an officer arrests her anyway, that's not a gray area. That's willful constitutional violation. His law enforcement career ended permanently. No department would hire him after the ruling. He tried private security but couldn't maintain employment once clients learned his history. Last anyone heard, he'd left the state entirely. Rodriguez, his partner who stood silent throughout Sarah's arrest, received a different fate. She cooperated fully with investigators, testified about department culture that discouraged challenging fellow officers, admitted she knew the stop was wrong but feared retaliation for speaking up. The city suspended her for 6 months without pay, but allowed her to return after completing additional training and agreeing to serve as an instructor on constitutional policing. Sarah's case became the foundation for a legal defense fund Stone established. It provides free representation to anyone arrested for asserting Fourth Amendment rights. In 5 years, The fund has taken on 63 cases, won 58. The 5 losses were appealed. 3 were overturned. The pharmacy footage gets shown in law schools now. Constitutional law professors use it to teach students about reasonable suspicion standards, what it actually means, how easily it gets violated, how important documentation becomes when challenging authority. Sarah's hospital promoted her to nurse educator. She trains new staff not just on medical protocols, but on recognizing when policies violate patient rights or staff dignity. She teaches them that professional credentials don't protect you from bias, that knowing your rights matters more than assuming authority will be exercised lawfully. Her settlement money, after legal fees and taxes, came to roughly $400,000. She used half to pay off her student loans and buy a house. The other half went into the legal defense fund and community education programs. Money mattered less than making sure her experience created lasting change. Some nights, Sarah still has nightmares about handcuffs clicking shut, about standing in that pharmacy while everyone watched her get arrested for doing nothing wrong. Therapy helped. Time helped. Knowing her case prevented others from experiencing the same violation helped most of all. The Supreme Court cited her case in a ruling 2 years later, a decision about when officers can demand identification during investigative stops. The majority opinion quoted directly from the pharmacy footage. Sarah's clear articulation of Fourth Amendment protections became binding precedent. Her words, spoken under stress in a pharmacy while being unlawfully detained, are now constitutional law. Castellano's stop records led to broader investigations. Prosecutors reviewed every arrest he made over 5 years. 43 cases were overturned. People who'd pled guilty to obstruction charges had their records expunged. Some received compensation for wrongful conviction. Others just got their dignity back knowing they'd been right all along. The anonymous caller who reported Sarah was never identified. The tip line doesn't record caller information unless specifically requested. Some mysteries remain unsolved. Whether it was racial bias, mistaken identity, or deliberate harassment doesn't ultimately matter. What matters is how the system responded when the call came in. Sarah speaks at police academies now, not to condemn all officers, but to explain what unlawful stops feel like from the other side. How quickly authority becomes oppression when divorced from constitutional limits. How body cameras protect good officers as much as they expose bad ones. Most recruits listen respectfully. Some push back. She answers their questions patiently, knowing changed minds come slowly. The pharmacy still operates. Business actually increased after Sarah's case went public. People wanted to support a place that stood up for constitutional rights. That provided footage proving what happened. Howard, the pharmacist, became an unlikely civil rights advocate. He speaks at community meetings about the importance of security systems and the responsibility businesses have to protect customers from unlawful authority. Sarah's story isn't unique. That's what makes it important. Thousands of Americans get stopped annually and asked for papers they're not required to carry. Hundreds get arrested for asserting rights they're supposed to have. Most don't have pharmacy cameras recording. Most don't have lawyers willing to fight for years. Most settle quietly or plead guilty to charges that should never have been filed. But some cases break through. Some footage goes viral. Some juries award damages large enough to force systemic change. Sarah's arrest became one of those cases, not because what happened to her was unusual, but because everything got documented, because she knew her rights well enough to articulate them clearly, because she had resources to fight back. The Fourth Amendment means something, not as an abstract principle, but as lived protection. When Sarah stood in that pharmacy and cited it, she wasn't being difficult. She was exercising the most fundamental right Americans supposedly have, the right to be free from unreasonable government intrusion, the right to exist without constantly proving you belong. That right cost her months of stress, damaged reputation, and trauma that therapy continues to address. But it also proved something crucial. Documentation matters. Knowledge matters. Fighting back matters. Sometimes standing up for constitutional rights means getting arrested, but it also means those rights remain real rather than theoretical. Sarah still picks up prescriptions at that pharmacy, still wears scrubs to work, still serves her community as a nurse, but now she also serves as living proof that the system can work when you force it to. That body cameras and security footage make lies impossible. That juries will vindicate constitutional rights when presented with clear evidence. The $15.7 million judgment didn't just compensate Sarah. It sent a message to every department that employs officers who think badges grant unlimited authority. It established precedent protecting everyone who gets stopped and asked for papers they're not required to produce. It proved that constitutional violations have real consequences when documented and challenged. Sarah's case changed policy in 47 cities, freed 43 people from wrongful convictions, created precedent protecting millions, all because she knew her rights and refused to surrender them even when threatened with arrest. All because cameras recorded everything. All because she had the courage to fight back against a system that assumed she'd just comply. That pharmacy footage plays somewhere every day. In a classroom, a training session, a community meeting, a courtroom. Each viewing teaches the same lesson. Constitutional rights only protect you if you know them and assert them. Documentation only helps if it exists. Justice only happens when people demand it. This case was disturbing, but the one on the right ends in a way no one expects.
Driven by the pursuit of truth, our mission is to demand transparency and hold power to account. We trust in hard evidence because the records do not lie. Thank you for watching and staying informed.